Hey there, folks.
Hey there, folks.
This is Avery.
And this is Rita.
And you're listening to
I Don't Know Her,
the podcast where we talk about women
and some other folks
that you've probably never heard of.
But you should have.
And now you will.
Bingo, bingo.
And where are we recording from, Rita?
We are recording in a professional studio. Fuck yeah.
And we sound real professional.
Yes, we do.
We are in the Spokane Public Library's Central branch. There we go. That's the word.
There we go.
It used to be called the downtown one, which made more sense, but whatever. It's called Central now. And there are multiple recording studios. And we are in the podcast production one.
Yeah. Beautiful facility. It's the studio that we're in, if we could just describe it a little bit, it's got a wonderful, kind of a group meeting area. There's 4 mics. There's a full board. Looks like there's maybe a little bit of a worker's board, whiteboard right behind Avery. Mm-hmm. There's a window, which is nice. It makes everything feel kind of airy.
Yeah, people can watch us as they walk by, which is kind of funny. I think this is a great opportunity to present you with a question that one of our listeners asked.
All right. Which listener was it?
Well, I don't know if they want to be named on air.
Oh, okay.
But it's one we've met.
Will not name names.
It is one we have met personally and who has given us gifts. It's very, very kind. Okay. So she asked, what is our joint together? What do we think is our best episode or our favorite episode? And then individually, what ones have been our favorites?
You want to go first?
Well, I'm so curious because I'm I feel like I have to have a backup, right? For my individual one, because I'm like, what if that's the one we choose as our joint favorite?
Okay, I'll go first. My personal favorite that we did was the Alice Guy Blaché episode. Was that it?
Yes. That's why I was like, I have to wait because I bet we're going to pick the same one. It's the Alice Guy Blaché. That was the first filmmaker, first major woman who became a filmmaker. And it was hilarious.
And it was such a weird story. And I on that episode was losing my mind. It was hilarious.
We got to watch that video of the
mattress.
The mattress. There's a human inside of a mattress falling down the side of a hill, which is very funny. And then we even had that remember the Cabbage Patch doll thing?
Yeah, with the real babies?
Real baby heads in leaves of cabbage. It was very bizarre.
So yeah, that was a very bizarre episode, but I had a lot of fun on that one. So I feel like that one collectively is I feel like our best episode.
Yeah, and that was, let me bring up the notes because I actually was just looking at it. That was the second episode of season 3.
Okay.
What's funny is that my personal favorite that I've done was just after that. It was episode 4.
And what was that?
Elsa Blankstead.
Remind me. Oh.
She was the music editor who worked in Hollywood, but had that wild story about having
family
had given birth and didn't know she'd given birth. She was told the baby died. Mm-hmm. Remember in that Swedish hospital or whatever?
Yeah, and it just turned out her mother took her child, right?
No, the family said, yes,
right.
Please give up the baby. And the hospital took the baby, and the baby was then adopted and raised, having never known her biological mother until Elsa was a full adult, and this person reached out to her, and it happened through a whole bunch of Jewish society stuff, mm-hmm. The American Council for Jewish Women or whatever, and they were able to reunite as adults.
That was a wild story.
It was. And she was this Oscar-winning, incredible music editor with this really amazing and wild, twisty story from World War II to giving birth to a baby in the mountains and then having become a Hollywood music editor. It was a whole twisty turvy story.
That was a really good one. I did like that one a lot.
Yeah. What about you? What's your personal favorite?
My personal favorite was the Madam C.J. Walker one. Mm. I really enjoyed telling her story, and it was too, once we finished the episode, getting the letter from her great-great-granddaughter and sharing information that Madam C.J. Walker's hairline and beauty products were still around today. I mean, you can find them at Sephora.
Yeah.
And she built this empire, and she was the first African-American woman millionaire mogul here in the United States.
Yeah, the first African-American woman to become an independent millionaire.
Yes.
Well, and what's interesting about that for both of us is that Elsa Blankstead's grandson is also someone who wrote to us and like invited us to come stay with them if we're ever in Europe. And so clearly the ones that we're connecting to are the ones that connected to the people who were in their lives. And that's a really cool feeling. So love
Very
that
much so.
for all of us. So if you're not sure, I think Madam C.J. Walker was like season 1.
Yeah, very, very early on.
Yeah. And then Elsa and Alice Guy Blaché were both season 3. So I highly recommend you go back and check those out if you are a new listener or if you breezed past those. You should go
Take
back.
a listen.
Yeah, those are good ones.
They're good.
Do not go back to episode 1 though.
I've never looked back.
Don't. It's bleak. So you have a person for me today, I assume?
I do. We are in a kind of spooky season, so I wanted to do something that a person that I've been wanting to do for a while, but the story is very long. So I actually had to buy the book and read the book to make sure, and I couldn't even include everything.
Of course.
There's just no way. We can only do this in like an hour and a half.
So buckle up is what you're telling me.
Have you ever heard of Millicent Patrick?
No.
It's a cool name, huh?
Millicent. Which always reminds me of Maleficent.
Me too. She is an artist, designer, and Hollywood's first female movie monster creator.
Ooh, that's exciting.
And I thought you would like this one because Avery is super, super into film.
Yeah, I am.
Like, that's an understatement.
Yeah, although not as much my latter years as I did earlier.
And also, I'm still getting better from, the cold that I've had for a year and a half. So if I sound a little scratchy, I might have to clear my voice a little bit.
At this point, I'm sure Rita has like lung damage.
Probably, yeah. So Millicent was born Mildred Elizabeth Fulvia Rossi on November 11th, 1915. Throughout her life story, Millicent changes her name quite a few times, and I'll just refer to her as Millicent throughout the whole thing. She was the second of 3 kids born to Camille Charles Rossi and Elise Albertina Bill. Those are quite some names, by the way.
Camille and Elise?
Camille and Elise. Her father's name was Camille.
Interesting.
I know. I thought that was Camille Charles.
Well, in our last episode, the uncle's name was Joy.
Oh, that's right.
And I was like, oh, that's okay. It's different.
Her folks met and married in the early 1900s in San Francisco. Her mother was the child of German immigrants and was very outgoing, very artistic, but she suffered from mental health issues from a very young age, and it continued throughout her life. And the information basically that I was reading just seemed like it was just undiagnosed because they were like, oh, she's nervous,
Oh, well, that was like a catch-all term for any kind of mental issues or anxiety.
Yeah.
It was like nerves.
And that was it. So no treatment whatsoever. Her father, Camille, was Italian. He was super hard-headed, hard-driven, and obsessed with like making a name for himself and like creating a fortune. He got into engineering and he set out to make a name for himself, developing structures during the gold rush in San Francisco. There's a lot of development going on. Things are booming. There's a lot of money to make. He jumped back and forth quite a bit from Mexico and California, and he worked as a structural engineer because there was a greater need because I guess there was a giant earthquake in San Francisco.
Yeah, the big earthquake.
Yeah, and so people were like, holy shit, we need to reinforce our buildings better. So he got more into the structural engineering of like being able to make earthquake-ready buildings. Elise was bouncing with him back and forth. She got pregnant with their first child. She kind of just followed him in what he wanted to do. It wasn't really kind of her goal, but she just kind of did what she was told. Millicent said that her mother was often a frustrated woman, sad, but she would never say a word. She just would follow. So when Millicent was very young, her father got hired to help consult and build an enormous estate for a man named William Randolph, who was a huge media mogul, which, do you know that name?
I do know who he is.
He moved Millicent's entire family to a ranch just outside the property in an area called San Simeon. There, they lived a simple life where her father worked on constructing this huge project. And when I say a huge property, he was building a mansion that ended up turning into what was almost like a castle. And he built like outbuildings for like cottages and homes for like his friends and family. It was enormous. Like this guy had so much money.
Yeah, William Randolph was like huge, really famous.
She attended a small local school where she was one of the top students. She became an excellent piano player, and she joined the school orchestra and began acting in school plays. Even though she was allowed to participate in like these boisterous activities, her father kept a really tight grip on her. She was not allowed to have a social life outside of school and outside of the home. He had her dress in outfits that completely hid her skin and her shape. Yeah. He even controlled sometimes what she ate.
That sounds gross.
Yeah. She was kept at home most of the time. She spent quite a few of her her developing teenage years at the ranch while her father built this estate. She said that she spent a lot of time around this wealthy family, saw them having fun, saw them living in opulence, but she very much felt like outside looking in. She was literally living in this beautiful rolling hill country, but it wasn't real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like her life on the outside looks perfect, but once you take a peek on the inside, it is fucked up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fucked up situation. That's a very abusive dynamic.
Yeah. She's kind of just trapping her.
Yeah, it is. And it's like literally from the textbook of how men entrap women and keep them, right? Like it's classic emotional abuse.
And her mother, too, didn't do anything to stop it. Her mother actually reinforced it, but her mother was also probably trapped.
Exactly. Like he didn't learn that. That was not the first time.
Yeah.
He's clearly done it to other women, probably her mother.
Her father ends up getting into a huge conflict with the owner of the property. He oversteps like what he thinks he's in charge of. He's also very arrogant. He's very hard-headed, obviously kind of a mean person. And he ends up getting fired from the project.
Oops.
Yep. He done messed up. So the family picks up and has to move, and they return to San Francisco. And at this time, Millicent's about 17 years old, and she starts making plans to take steps to try to leave, kind of create her own future. So after she graduates high school, she starts attending Glendale Junior College. I think the only reason that she was allowed to attend this college was because her brother also went there. So I think her father felt comfortable because her brother took her there,
Could watch
brought
over
her home, could watch her. She pretty much kept to herself during the program. She concentrated on her work, and she joined the art program. She began doing art for the yearbook, and in a year, she moved up to becoming the editor of the yearbook.
And she's at a junior college, right?
She's in a junior college. She worked mainly with ink and pastels, and she would create like the images that kind of get pasted throughout the yearbooks, like for, honor society and whatever. I don't know. I was never in yearbook. Actually was never really in a yearbook. I used to dodge the cameras because I did not want to be documented.
See, I remember having counted every time I was in the yearbook and being like upset.
Really?
And then by my senior year, I was on like almost every other page.
Do you remember that they when they used to put your names in the back and they would put the numbers of the pages of how many
times you show up?
Yeah, my junior year, I was on one.
And it was probably your school photo.
It was.
You were not
It was
into
like
that.
Rita Villanueva, page 7. That was it. Her confidence was boosted after becoming editor, and she thought she could do more. So she sought out and applied for 3 separate scholarships being offered by I hope I'm saying this right, the Chouinard Art Institute in Southern California. This institute was newly founded, and it was an up-and-coming art school. It taught fine art, commercial art, and after Millicent applied, she won all 3 scholarships.
Oh, so she was actually probably really talented.
Fairly talented. She dropped out of her junior college, and she enrolled in Chouinard. The school was actually founded and run by a woman. and her name was Madame Nelbert Chenard.
That's really an unfortunate first name.
I mean, I guess they
Or
could just call her
probably-
Nell.
It was probably not her first name. It was probably like a combined last name.
Something like that.
But even if it was, that was a first name. Sorry, Nelbert.
Nelbert. She was a director there. She was also a teacher. She taught painting, sculpting, and drawing. And Millicent did wonderful there. She really thrived. Nelbert took her under her wing, taught her a lot. And she said she finally felt like she fit somewhere, that she could have some freedom, that she could maybe possibly have some friends. This school was also unique in another way. In the late 1920s, Madame Nelbert was approached by Walt Disney. And he was coming off of creating Snow White and wanted to create more full-length animated films. To do that, he needed his artists to sharpen up their artistry skills. So he scoured multiple art institutes throughout California to place his artists in and receive personal lessons on especially how to draw motion. And so he sent some of his artists to the Chouinard. And Millicent says she remembers that he would physically drive his students there and then pick them up after classes and then take them back to the studio. And they would have workshops. So as Disney was taking a look at other students' work, he took a peek at what Millicent was working on, and he was really impressed with what she was doing. So he ended up offering her a job in his animation department. And Millicent jumped on the offer. So she now had a paying job. So that was even more towards her goal of being free and on her own. She began working in the ink and painting department for Disney. And so after the animators would create their base background, they would create their cells, which would have the animated character on there. So let's just use Snow White as an example. So when the animators were done creating their cells, they would throw them to the ink and painting department. And that would be what Millicent was doing. And the entire department was all female. And she would paint and ink, and it was basically creating the images that would start to move. And she was really, really good at painting, but her ink work was where her skill was at. She was really good at creating flowing movement. And she said that there was really no room for mistakes. There was no erasing, she said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you had to be where you watch them where they flip the pages and they're we'll draw and they'll look and they'll draw and they'll look. She did that for hours. And she had to be bent over one of those light boxes. And they all had to wear these long smocks, and they would just sit in a room, each one with their own light box. She would mix her own ink because she liked a certain type of texture, and they would sit there and just create animation.
It's wild to me that they would have multiple people doing that, because then that's what if this person's style is slightly different from this other person's style? How do you make it look like the same?
Concise. I think that's what the storyboarding was for, is to kind of create a look for the character.
Well, yeah, for sure. But still, the way I write my name is different than how you would write my name.
True.
And that's what I'm well, that would be interesting to see how that translates.
Yeah. Why does this character look so good? And this one over here is all choppy. So having a job now, she felt really confident. She started wearing makeup. Oh no.
Quel horror.
She started wearing her own clothing, creating her own sense of style. And her parents did not approve, of course, because
Is she living at home?
She's still living at home.
Ooh, yikes.
So it was a little hard for her to bounce back and forth, but she really started to just not care. She's I have a job. I'm working. I'm contributing. I can buy my own stuff. You don't have to buy it for me. She also branched out socially. She was described as just a really fun, joyful person, and she made friends very easily. She ended up moving up to the animation and effects department quite quickly. And Disney was making a new film, and he wanted her to work on this new project. The film was Fantasia.
Ooh, yeah, the one.
Fantasia.
The one that put them on the map, really.
Oh, yeah.
Changed the way film was made, changed how animation worked.
It's one of the greatest classics of all time. And man, that movie's kind of scary.
There are moments that are terrifying.
Yes. She specifically worked on the sequence called Night on Bald Mountain, which is the character called the Chernabog, which is the giant dark god with like horns and wings. And it starts with like a mountaintop and the sun goes down and like the mountaintop opens up and it turns out that it's like the demon's wings.
Oh, God.
And he's like perched on top. And so then he like, it's this huge like orchestral like production and he's like raining fire down on people and there's like a bunch of ghosts and skeletons and it's very theatrical. It's really dark.
Yeah. I don't remember that scene, but I remember being terrified by Fantasia and never wanting to watch it.
Yes.
My mom would be like, "Do you want to watch Fantasia?" No, I
don't.
No, I don't. Want to have nightmares tonight.
So she worked on that really scary scene and she had a wonderful time creating like this kind of new style of animation where they were mixing more of the pastel and ink rather than hard lines. They started softening things up to create more movement. So after Fantasia, she moved on to working on Dumbo. And while working on Dumbo, there was a huge upset between the workers and the Disney company. And over 200 employees walked out on him on strike at that time.
Good for them.
And
Pro-union.
it was for fair wages. He wasn't paying shit. And Millicent didn't really want to make waves because she thought her job's at stake. And she worked really hard to get there. So she just continued on working. But the strike did affect her anyway. Once Disney agreed to restructure, they did unionize. He had to lay off people. And unfortunately, she was one of the people that got laid off.
Yep. And also she should have just joined the other workers. Solidarity, man.
Yeah. When she left, it might have been time for her to go because she started to suffer from very severe migraines. And they were thinking it was a condition because she was staring at the light box for so long. And I don't know if any other artists like suffered from that same affliction. I would assume it would affect your eyesight.
I would assume that. And like probably if you think about what
Your back?
what the actual paints and stuff were made of at the time, there was probably some chemicals that smelled.
Ooh.
And you're in a tight space and there's a lot of it. Because they're all in the same space working on the thing. So it's like they all could have the same, exposure to this chemical and also to these light boxes. Like that seems a reasonable condition to have probably acquired over time.
Just hours and hours of exposure. She also got in some hot water in her romantic life and it mixed a little with work.
Uh-oh.
She began to have an affair with a married coworker. His name was Paul Fitzpatrick, and it was highly frowned upon for the staff to fraternize at all, especially
When you're married.
when he's married.
Yeah, Walt Disney was whatever, family oriented. He really wasn't, but he played himself off to be.
Well, this is pretty sad, but Paul's wife found out about their affair, and she asked Paul to stop seeing Millicent, and he refused, and so his wife took her life. Yeah,
Ooh,
it ended
no.
very messy.
That's bad.
Very
I don't
bad.
like that way.
Well, the two ended up getting married anyways, and she ended up leaving Disney for good. After that, she decided to step on the other side of the camera. So one thing I didn't mention is that she is stunning. She is gorgeous. And so she took a stab at modeling, and she quickly signed with an agency, and she began modeling like jewelry. She was doing ads, and she was working like the trade shows, where they're like,
Look at this beautiful car.
we did the same hand.
We both did like the Vanna White hand gestures.
At this time, because of her marriage to Paul and that whole situation, her parents decided to just dissolve their relationship with her completely. Because then she started modeling. They didn't think that was appropriate. So they didn't want anything to do with her anymore.
So she got like disowned.
Yes. Her marriage to Paul ended up dissolving. She kept the Patrick from the Fitzpatrick in his last name. So she changed her name, to...
Yeah, she was just like, you know what, I like this part.
This part, yeah.
Keep it.
She kept modeling till about 1947. She's only about 30 years old at this time. She was spotted and, in quotations, discovered by a producer. He wanted to put her in films. It wasn't anything, she wasn't a star. She was the background worker or background. What do you call that? Is that just a PG worker?
Background.
Yeah.
Actor.
She'd be like lady number 3, you know, that doesn't even have a title.
Extras.
Extra. She was in a movie that was directed by Charlie Chaplin. She was a background actor for Marilyn Monroe. So she was like working and rubbing elbows with famous people, but she herself was never made it, you know?
Yeah, it never amounted to much.
It actually, in the book that I read, the author said that Millicent was actually a pretty terrible actress. Like watching old films, they were just like, her acting was awful.
There is a mouse.
Oh no.
Stiff. Overacting. I love bad acting though. I think it's fun to watch.
So during her acting career, she never stopped drawing though. There was a lot of time between set, reset, makeup, taking different shots. She would just sit down and sketch. She started doing portraits of the other actors and like giving to them as gifts. And she caught another big break by doing this. So there's a man named George Westmore.
Nope. Don't know him.
He's regarded as an iconic and revolutionary hair and makeup stylist in Hollywood. And one of his like most iconic wig designs was the big bouncy curls of Shirley Temple.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I didn't know that she had fake hair.
I didn't know that was fake either.
Yeah.
I thought that was her real hair.
He said that to pin in their like extensions, it was $50 a curl.
In like the 40s or whatever? Ooh, that's
an expensive wig.
That's very expensive.
He created an empire which he passed down to his sons. One in particular was named Bud Westmore. And Bud was talented like his father. And one day, Millicent ends up in his chair. And he's doing her makeup, he's doing her hair, and she's sketching. And she shows her sketches to Bud, and he's like, holy shit, you're fantastic. He's like, these are amazing. He was working for Universal at the time, and he asked her if she wanted a job as a special effects makeup artist in his department. And she jumps on the opportunity because she's kind of getting tired of the acting thing. It's not going anywhere.
It's not going to go anywhere.
No, she's not going to be Marilyn Monroe.
Girl, you are not doing much with this.
She was the only one on his team that was a woman. And she was involved with pre-production design for props and the special effects makeup, which was a big deal that she actually got to have input. Mm-hmm. So while working in this department, she was asked to create a look for a monster for the studio's latest film or horror film that was going to be made. The movie was about 2 scientists who discover a human skeleton with webbed fingers and toes. And they set off to try to see if there's a missing link between humans and amphibians. Do you know what movie I'm talking about?
Is this Swamp Thing?
Nope.
What is it?
The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Oh, I was so close.
So she started researching prehistoric animals, fish, reptiles. She ends up creating this little character she calls Gillman.
It's pretty cute, though.
It's pretty cute. Her design was sent back, I think she said at least 3 to 4 times to be, obviously that's a process. Like, no, do this, make it look more like that. They wanted to make sure it was going to look scary enough. It was a horror film. And executing and building the suit was really tough. The prop department didn't want to take any of her advice in wearing what she called like wearable molds to create the creature suit. And instead they tried to just like mold the head and the hands and the feet and then have the guy wear a leotard.
That was really cute.
And it looked awful.
Yeah,
and
no kidding.
And the director was like, this looks like garbage. Like, do what she says.
She was basically like, use prosthetics.
Yes.
Yeah, and they were like, no, I think we'll just use
a leotard.
leotard.
Yeah, it was awful. So they sent it back. They built it how she had envisioned it, and they finished it with special effects makeup. So in the horror like movie nerd world, it's argued that Millicent, because she didn't physically construct the suit herself, the prop department did that she didn't technically create the creature.
No, that's not how that works.
And I call bullshit.
That's like saying Christian Siriano is not a fashion designer because other people sew the clothes.
Yeah.
It's like, no, but he created it.
He created and envisioned the design.
He created the pattern, and then he said, now I want you to make it.
Or the architect that designed a building, you got to have people build it.
Yeah, like they're not the one nailing in every stud, but they did the building. That's their design.
Even the prop guy, Chris Muller, who did the molds and physically constructed the suit, said, she handed me the design.
Yeah.
She is the creator of this creature.
Again, clothes are made from patterns. The patterns and the design are made by the designer. You can't have like a new dress come out and be like, oh, it was made by the sewer. That's why in Project Runway, they were constantly like, it's not, the best seamstress. It's the best designer.
Yeah. I love Project Runway, by the way.
I know, I'm
obsessed. So good. Well, when it came time for the movie to be promoted, the studio kind of had a wild idea. They wanted to send Millicent, she looked like a movie star herself. They wanted to send her on tour with the film and bring along the creature suit that she had created. And they wanted to promote it as the beauty who created the beast, which is brilliant.
Very clever. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, to create a buzz. I mean, this beautiful woman, look, she created this monster. They wanted to showcase her too as the monster maker. Well, Bud Westmore was an egotistical asshole.
Oh, great.
And he flew off the handle. And he was like, no. He said he wanted the credit since it was his department. He said never had it ever been anyone else in the credits other than the actors, department directors, producer, and the director himself. Everybody else does not get role credit. And so he threw a big, huge stink, and the studio decided to back down. They retooled her tour. They still wanted to send her, but they made it more of like, she was the model that was showcasing she was doing the trade show again.
Yep.
Here's this beautiful watch.
Pretty face.
Yes.
Next to this monstrous suit.
She ended up doing the tour. It didn't take long for the press to really love her, though, because she was very open. She was very bubbly. Obviously, she's beautiful. She was funny. And they treated her more of like the creature's like caretaker. Like she was like kind of his like little companion.
Girlfriend?
I don't know. It was marketed really weird. She was getting a lot of attention by the press. And actually the press was kind of like, do you have more to do with this than you're saying? Because she knew a lot about it.
Yeah.
And they're like, how do you
know this?
Yeah.
Model.
And so Bud was like furious that she was getting exposure. And he said she broke the rules, that she was not supposed to be marketing herself as the creator. So when she came back, he fired her.
Of course he did.
Yeah. And after that experience, Millicent decided she's just done. She's like, I'm going to leave Hollywood for good. After that, she did have a string, and I mean a string, of other marriages.
Oh, no.
Other relationships. But she did really have kind of a glamorous, fun life. She just couldn't really nail down that relationship part. She still was really into fashion. She had a very like big social life. She still kind of lived her life. She had fun. She ended up dedicating much of her time to charity, fundraising for orphans, and was active in the World Adoption International Fund. She had a big soft spot for children who did not have homes. And I think that kind of reflects on probably
in her own life, her own experience of feeling adrift.
Yeah. As she aged, though, her health deteriorated really fast. She ended up getting diagnosed with Parkinson's.
Oh, no.
And then later breast cancer.
Oh, yikes. What a double whammy.
Millicent ended up passing away on February 24th, 1998. And she was the age of 82.
I mean, that's a long life,
That's a long life. She was cremated and her ashes were spread per her wishes. She was uncredited for her work on the creature till about 2015.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So it took that long.
It was the work of a horror movie buff and a best-selling author named Mallory O'Mara. And she ended up finding a photo of Millicent creating sketches of the creature. And she got kind of curious. And Mallory O'Mara is also in film, and she makes horror movies. And she was just like, who's this woman? You know, I've never even heard of who this is. Got kind of struck by the name. She ended up doing countless hours of research. She actually traveled to the Disney headquarters and went through their archives to find out Millicent's story and what she ended up doing and how she was an artist on Fantasia, and how she did work on Dumbo. And it led her down the trail to figure out like this story of her creating this horror movie iconic classic creature that nobody knew that a woman had done. And Mallory O'Mara said that she had questioned whether or not to do the book, but she had been treated so badly as a woman in the film industry. Even today, she was like, she needs to get credit where credit is due, and this story needs to come out. So she ended up writing a book, and it was called The Lady from the Black Lagoon, Story of Millicent Patrick, which was published in 2019. She also wrote another book, which I'm going to read next, called Girly Drinks. Have you heard of that?
I feel like I have.
It's about women drinking and making alcohol throughout history.
Yeah, I think when I was doing my research for Prohibition,
I thought I saw that like in your notes or something.
No, I remember coming across that. I had actually come across a book by, oh my gosh, I'm going to get his name wrong. Lucas, you were there. Phil Mentner. You know what I'm talking about? He's a famous food writer. Anyway, he wrote a book called The Women Who Saved Whiskey.
Okay.
And that was like, I didn't end up reading it for my episode, but I definitely knew who he was. When I was looking into like the history of Prohibition and whatever, I remember reading that title somewhere, but I never read the book. I didn't use it as my research, but I'm curious to see how you like it when you do read it. Yeah,
I'm excited. And I actually did quite a bit of reading on Mallory herself and like the work that she's done in film, and the situation she was talking about that made her want to push to tell Millicent's story was she had worked really hard to get onto a set, and she was doing, I forget what she was working on, and she was paired with this other guy to work on something, and he's like, so how long have you been sleeping with the director? Ugh. And she was like, and she had one of those moments where she's like, in my head, you know, I'm flying across the table and I'm punching him in the face, but instead I'm standing there like an idiot, like what? Dumbfounded at what I just heard.
Yeah.
And she was like, I'm not. And he was like, oh, that's interesting. Like she couldn't possibly have gotten the job.
On her own merits.
On her own bearings.
Yeah.
And so she said when she discovered Millicent's story, she knew that this book had to happen. So she ended up traveling to that ranch where Millicent spent most of her formative teenage years. Like I said, she went to Disney and dug through archives. She ended up tracking down people who had worked with people who had worked with Millicent, who had letters from her. There's postcards. She found the bill, clothing bill from the tour that she did when she was touring with the creature. So she found all these like little touch notes, and just like she found a postcard that was written by Millicent. It was like her actual handwriting. She said she just burst into tears because she's like, this is like a little piece of her, which is really cool.
That is cool.
She said definitely women in film are underrepresented.
Absolutely.
Still no. So she was like, writing this book was to be able to say, no, we've been here. We've been doing shit and getting it done.
Yeah. Well, even just the idea that probably most of the people who were doing the line work and the painting and the whatever of all of those really great classic animated films were women who went uncredited. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty profound revelation.
Yeah. So Mallory O'Mara's book was my primary source of material. Did not touch Wikipedia, did not touch anything else. The book is fantastic. If you've got Google Play Books, it's on audiobook, and it's also available just to read.
As a print and ebook. Mm-hmm. All right, well, that's great. Thank you for that story.
You're welcome.
Little glimpse into the film industry that I wasn't aware of, and I always love that. I love that we started and ended with filmmakers.
Oh yeah,
I didn't even realize that.
Full
Nice little
circle.
bookend. We didn't even plan it. Kismet.
Right.
Well, thank you everybody for listening. Don't forget that we have some merch available. You can go on our Instagram or you can hit our website up. There's links to get there through our link tree.
And we'd like to thank the man in the room, Lucas McIntyre, for being our editor.
The man in the room, Lucas.
And also
here.
to Jennifer Finch, who provides our rockin' opening music.
And actually, L7 is back on tour right now. So if you are interested in hearing more L7, look at their current tour list. They might be in your city.
All right. Till next time, folks.
Goodbye.